Today's video will explain the encapsulation metric of convenience. Hello, I'm James Helfrich. The convenience metric is much like cohesion and coupling, and it has several different levels. This video will explain those levels and show different methods to identify the level of convenience in a class. Convenience is the degree in which the properties of a class are presented to a client in a format which facilitates the use in an application. And we have 5 levels of convenience, just like we have several levels of cohesion or coupling. The first is seamless, and that is the class perfectly aligns with the needs of the application. Next, we have easy. No extra work is required to manipulate the data in order to use the class. Next, we have straightforward. Any data manipulation can be readily performed. Then we have convoluted. Much needs to be done to use the class. And finally, and worst of all, is prohibitive. More work is required than it is worth. In other words, it takes more effort to use the class and the benefit we derive from the class. Let's take a look at these 5 levels in turn. First is seamless. Seamless convenience is when public interfaces of a class are perfectly aligned with the needs of the application. For a provider to achieve seamless convenience, she needs to offload as much work as possible from the application and then onto the class. This allows the client to work at a higher level of abstraction, freeing him or her from having to manage the data of the class. In other words, we've done as much work as we can to make the client's job easy. Now, one level below that is easy. Easy convenience is when no extra work is required of the client to manipulate data going into and coming out of the class. The hallmark of easy convenience is the lack of any data conversion by the client. The format of the data utilized by the application is the same as used by the client's public interfaces. For an example, if I have a distance class and the client expects meters and the class also expects meters, then no data conversion from meters to imperial or anything else is required, and we're going to be easy. Now, straightforward convenience is when any data manipulation can be readily performed by all the clients. Here, all the necessary tools to perform the conversion are present and available. For an example, the client expects metric units and the class uses imperial, but the conversion can be performed with readily accessible functions that converts metric to imperial and vice versa. Another example, the client expects dollars, but the class uses euros. And once again, if I have a function to do the conversion, then it's going to be straightforward convenience. A class can be categorized as convoluted when a great deal of work needs to be done to manipulate data going into and out of the class, often requiring a layer or adapter to be written to facilitate the process. This is typically when the client uses one paradigm and the provider uses another. For an example, consider a video game where the physics engine is written using spherical coordinates, where we have distance and polar angle and abysmal angle, but the game is written in Cartesian coordinates, x, y, and z. For the most part, this can be readily accomplished with a single function call. However, since there are many spherical coordinates describing a single Cartesian origin, we can have 2 coordinates with the same Cartesian system but are not with the same spherical system. Having to deal with this complexity makes the interface convoluted. The worst level is prohibitive. Prohibitive convenience is when more work is required to use the class than benefit is derived from the class. This happens when the client tries to use an inappropriate tool for the job, or using an existing class that does not really help with the job in hand. It can also happen when the provider has an incomplete or erroneous understanding of the client's needs. This could be the result of the client's needs changing, imprecise requirements, the provider failing to understand the requirements, or a simple communication breakdown. When the class is prohibitive, it is usually better to start over and develop a more appropriate tool. While this may seem obvious, it is often not the chosen path. For political or social reasons, programmers are often compelled to use prohibitive tools. In cases like these, the best thing that can be done is to create a facade. To recap, convenience is the degree in which properties are presented to the client in a format which facilitates use in the application. We're always striving for seamless, and that's when the interface is perfectly aligned with the needs of the application. Sometimes easy is the best we can do. However, if we find ourselves in straightforward, convoluted, or prohibitive, perhaps the best thing to do is rethink our design and start over. You can learn more about convenience in the convenience chapter of the software design textbook.